Welcome back, day three, week three, and I should say a big congratulations to you because you got a job. Hopefully you did. If you didn't, that's okay. But today we're thinking about making choices about job offers. So part of your job when you're beginning a new career is looking at what is actually being offered to you and trying to look at it from all sides till you actually figure out what the value is and does it make sense to accept this or not. I kind of mentioned this last time, but when you get an offer, you're typically going to have options. And even though it feels like, maybe tough economy times or just the difficulty of finding a first job out of college can make you feel like I don't have any bargaining power. So we're going to find out in the next couple of weeks, we do have some power. So moving right along. Also, if your job is the same as Isaac's job here, it could get threatening pretty quickly. All right, so your first task when getting a job offer is don't screw this up. That's my advice for a challenging economy. Now, that's not fair, right? A lot of this stuff is outside of your control, but like I mentioned before, much of this is a numbers game. If you're not currently employed and you do get a job offer, and you only get one offer that is possible, you should probably take that offer, right? That's kind of advice piece number one. Like if one of these fine companies offers you something, you might want to take it. But having said that, there are times when even having one offer means you should still reject that offer. Because sometimes those jobs cost you more than they're worth. Maybe it's going to cost you in time. Maybe it's going to cost you in auto costs, right? Like maybe it's going to cost you in commute or whatever it is. There are all these expenses that are added on to whatever job you take on. And if the rewards and the compensation does not outweigh those deficits, then it might not be worth it. It's especially true if you end up getting an unpaid internship. Now, I should say that some fields more or less require an unpaid internship to get involved in them. But you have to be able to afford that somehow, right? Like, can you live for months or even years without an income? And if you can, if you have that kind of support or you have that kind of savings, and you have a dream and there's an unpaid internship that leads to that, by all means, go for it. But for everybody else, that's a no, right? That's a non-starter. You shouldn't take a job offer if it's something that you can't put on your resume in the future, right? Or something that would damage your credentials in the future. Don't pick up a job that's going to create legal, financial, or psychological problems down the road. And that might also include physical problems, right? Like there's a lot of jobs out there that require you to actually use your body, and a lot of them require you to abuse your body in that process. And if you're not getting compensated for that, then that might not be worth it for those healthcare costs down the road. If a job offer potentially changes your career trajectory in a negative way, like if you already have a job, that job is, disappearing for one reason or another, it might be tempting to accept the first thing that comes along, but if it means you're dropping your salary or your title, it could hurt you down the road, right? Maybe it's better to take the unemployment and wait. If one of those things is true, you don't have to take the job, okay? As much as it might feel like, how do I say no to a job offer? There are some bad job offers out there. Down economies still offer possibilities and choices. It can be hard to imagine depending on what your situation happens to be, but things do change pretty quickly. And actually, if you look at this year, for example, like the drop was incredibly fast in March, and the bubble's going to go the other way before too long. So you could be surprised at how quickly we bounce back from this, not a recession, but sort of a fake recession that we have gotten ourselves into. It's likely you're going to have multiple job offers to weigh at least down the road, right? Even if not today. You could be recruited from the position that you're already in. Maybe you interview for multiple jobs at once and you actually do get two offers at the same time. That happens. It's a unique position. It's a very nice position to be in, but it can be just as difficult as feeling like you have no offers sometimes. Because that's the other piece of it. We talked about this before, but losing hurts more than winning feels good, right? So sometimes if you're looking at two options and you say like, well, which of these am I going to regret the most? It makes that decision that much more difficult, right? If you think about what am I losing from doing this thing, it can become a problem. Whatever you do, you're looking at not just what the job is offering you, but the entirety of the job, right? Like, what's that workplace going to be like? What's the situation going to be like? Can I manage it? Is it something that I want to do or be at? Whatever you're doing, though, you're ultimately rolling the dice a little bit. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know, maybe you find the perfect job offer and everything is ideal and the company collapses in a couple of years, right? Like, it's hard to predict some of that. Like, you can look at, signs and you can do some research, but you can't know what's going to happen. So you have to be okay with the decision that you're making, knowing full well that you do not have all the information. This kind of goes back to what System 1 is trying to do, right? Your two systems of thinking. System 1 believes, again, that what you see is all there is. And sometimes when you're making a choice, you have to content yourself with that, because I might not be able to know everything about the future. And I have to deal with the stuff that I am limited to seeing. But occasionally you get an offer you can't refuse, and that's kind of nice, simplifies things, but other times it doesn't happen, right? So how do you know what you're getting into? How do you figure out how to read the fine print? How do you make the best decision about a choice of a job? Well, first we have to check in on your brain, see how things are going upstairs. When you're conscious, your mind is constantly seeing how things are, right? So we talked about this last time. System 1 is that always on, always automatic system that's like constantly looking around, especially for threats, right? It's interested in making sure that things are okay. It's sort of like our personal eye of Sauron, right? That's sort of always checking, looking for hobbitses. System 2 only wakes up or gets alerted or is engaged if System 1 says, hey, I got a problem here, right? Like, or System 1 says, I don't understand this illusion that I'm looking at. And then System 2 wakes up and says, okay, let me take a look at it. Maybe I know what's up. One thing that System 1 checks for is a quality that's called cognitive ease, okay? That's what it means, like, how easy is it to think about something? And you should know something about cognitive ease. If things are really easy, if the thinking that you're doing is not difficult, if you're not being frustrated, if you're just kind of sitting there, right? There's no mental stress or danger, which is good. But it doesn't mean everything's perfect, right? And cognitive strain, the converse of that, like when you feel like something's wrong, I have to think about this, I have to figure this out, I have to solve this puzzle, that means a new problem has appeared, right? It's not necessarily a bad thing, it just means suddenly System 2 has to get to work. So some of the causes of cognitive ease are these really familiar things, like things that we've done before, repeated experiences, very familiar things, memories, all that stuff that we're really used to produces cognitive ease. And so does something that's clear. Like if there are words in front of you that just say, walk, you're like, oh, I can walk across the street, right? It's very clear, there's no questions, there's nothing I have to unpack. System 1 is fine with that. If there's an idea that you're primed for, so remember we talked about priming last time, like if I've already been primed to think about food and I see food, I'm like, oh yeah, I was ready for that. And then, of course, I'm always ready for food. And then if you're already in a good mood, or you're, could be caused because you're in a good mood, you get this cognitive ease. So all that stuff adds up to feeling okay. Like thinking's not hard right now. Things are fine. And the results of that are these other items. It could be something feels familiar, right? And what's interesting is something doesn't just feel familiar because it is familiar. It could just feel that way, right? Like I could see, a site that I've never seen before, but just because it fits so well into some past memory that I have, I feel fine seeing it, right? No questions. If something feels true to me, I'm like, yeah, 2 + 2 really is 4, right? If something feels good as a result of being familiar and clear, it's like, yes, I like that walk sign. That's clear to me. That feels like the right sign. And it feels effortless, right? Like I'm not doing any work. So all of this is sort of what cognitive ease does. It starts with these causes and it has these effects on the other end. Cognitive ease is associated with having a good mood, enjoying where you're at. Interestingly, it helps you believe what other people say. It helps you trust your own instincts and intuitions. It helps you find familiarity somewhere. And sometimes it's a little superficial, right? Whereas cognitive strain is on the other end of the spectrum, as you might guess. It makes you more vigilant, so you're careful, you're alert, you're like looking for problems, more suspicious as a result of that. It takes effort to do the things that you're trying to do that are under strain. It can make you feel like mad. You might make fewer mistakes because you're actually paying attention. But you're also going to be less creative, weirdly enough, and you might be a little mad or peeved. Love that word. So it's sort of two sides of it, right? Thinking system one associated with cognitive ease, thinking system two has to show up when there's cognitive strain. So what happens when you look at this image? There's at least one but in it. So we know it's a good image. Cognitive ease test. Well, consider your feelings of cognitive ease as you do this next task. Okay, so think about where you're at right now. Hopefully you are sort of feeling not so stressed out, just hanging out a little bit. Okay, I want you to do something for me. Identify any of the following companies that are familiar to you. Arcana & Co., Cathins, Zabi, or Vidala. Give you a moment. Let's pause it. Okay, hopefully you're back with us. What was happening there? What do you remember? Do you remember this? This was on one of the first slides today, and I didn't make a big deal out of it except saying maybe one of these companies will hire you. And probably you glanced at it and you saw a few companies on there you recognized, like Walmart, Nike, right? But there's one company on here that's not a real company. Can you find it? It says Cathins company here. That's not a real company. At least it's not one that I'm aware of. So a researcher, Larry Jacoby, talked about this sort of weird experience. He said the experience of familiarity has a simple but powerful quality of pastness. It seems to indicate that it's a direct reflection of prior experience. So you can sort of group this into the idea of deja vu, right? So let's back up for just a minute. Keep backing up. There's a lot of slides. Okay, so back here you were primed and it said Cathins, right? And all these other things you already sort of knew and you glossed over them. Now your brain might not have even looked at Cathins because it might have glanced at like Coke, Tesla, Intel, because like, oh, okay, it's just companies, right? And stopped looking. But you might have been primed by that Cathins if you saw it, so that when you actually got to this question, you saw it and were like, oh wait, I do recognize that. So if you got that answer, it's very interesting. Because something about your brain said, hey, that pastness, I saw something, it was familiar, I remember seeing that, that must be a real thing, right? So even though it's something you've probably never seen before, unless you played Diablo 2, then you probably wouldn't have any attachment to that word except that it showed up, right? But what's interesting about this is it means that things that we experience, we feel are true, right? But you can experience things that are not true. So for example, if I live my life on social media and I'm scrolling through my Facebook all the time because I'm an old person, and I see the same, let's call it propaganda, showing up again and again and again and again. Well, when I see that again in a few weeks, I'm getting ready to vote, I'll be like, oh yeah, that's familiar. I remember that. And System 1 says if it's familiar, it's true. And if you remember it, it's true. And if it doesn't take a lot of work, it's true, right? So unless I engage System 2, it says, hey, I should think critically about whether or not this is actually factually correct. System 1 says, no, I remember this. It's true. So when you make choices, make sure you're actually weighing the merits and problems. You're actually looking at what's true about it and what's false, and not just going with what's familiar, right? It's just because Nike gives you an offer doesn't mean it's a good offer, right? You might say, oh, I'll do anything to work for Nike. No, you wouldn't, right? You shouldn't, okay? So cognitive ease is kind of your enemy. It means that, wait a minute, why is this so easy to make a choice? Something's going on, right? So we'll think about that as we unpack the anatomy of some job offers. So here's what goes into a job offer. There's the money piece, there's the benefits piece, and everything kind of groups into one of those two categories, right? It's like, what am I going to get paid, and what am I going to get paid indirectly, is what it breaks down to. And we're going to look at each of these different types of compensation today, not necessarily in huge depth, because a lot of these we're going to come back to in the spring for other reasons in financial planning, but I want you to get an idea of what it is that you might be looking at when you get that job offer and how you make a good decision about it. And one thing to do too is temper your expectations before you look at job offers. And if you're already applying for jobs, you might have already gotten a sense of this, but depending on where the job is located in society, your compensation is going to change, right? So if you're looking at a job in the private sector and you're looking at like a large corporation, there's very likely the possibility of getting a high salary, bonuses, there could be some real direct compensation that's pretty high. And the benefits are probably decent because the larger the corporation, the more sway they have when they bargain with insurance companies and so forth. And so they can get you usually pretty good compensation and, decent benefits. If you're looking at a small business, then salaries are probably capped at a lower position depending on how small they are. They just don't have as much leeway to go up the chain, and the benefits are typically trashed here. Maybe it really depends on the small business, right? But don't expect to get, free massages if you're working for some mom and pop establishment. If you're looking at the public sector, and you're looking at government jobs specifically, so that could be state jobs, federal jobs, local like city or county jobs. What I do, right? Like teaching in a university is a state job. Salary bonuses, not great. If you get high up in the administration, yeah, you can make bank, but the rest of us are doing okay. But the benefits are really good. And that's partly why when I applied to jobs, I looked really heavily at government jobs because I like getting really good benefits because I have a fear of going broke due to medical bankruptcy and I want to get good medical insurance. So look for that. If you work in a nonprofit, you're probably not going to have great salary and you might not have the best benefits either. So make sure you're doing that because you love it and not because you're trying to make a lot of money. So looking at that compensation piece, the money piece specifically, it's usually the easiest part of the job offer to assess, and it's usually the first thing you see, and it's oftentimes the only number we really care about. When you see a job posting online, and it's like, blah, 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 ooh, 85,000, it's like, oh, I'm interested, right? Like, I don't care about what the rest of the blurb says. I'm just looking at that number. It's really hard to not do that because our minds are programmed to focus on money. It's one of those things we look for. Like, we look for like food and sex and money. It's one of those like primary enforcers that makes us do things. And so it's pretty hard to not get caught up in the money. But could be cognitive ease saying, oh, don't worry about the rest of this. It's easy for me to decide that money is a good thing, right? Because I made that decision a long time ago. However, the way that the money gets to you could make a difference, right? Like, are you getting the money now? Is it part of a bonus structure that I might never see? Is it guaranteed? Is it potentially there? And all these questions go back to what you want to risk, what you can afford to lose, and what it is you're trying to gain, right? Now, wages versus salary is a pretty simple question. Salary just means this is what you're getting paid for all the work that you're doing, no matter how much work you do. And wages are, this is what you're getting paid per hour, right? It's a little bit different. Salary is fixed, so that means even if you work 80 hours a week and you're on salary, you're probably just getting your normal salary, probably not getting overtime. If you're paid hourly and you work 80 hours a week, should in theory be getting overtime, so good job. But also, if you're working 8 hours a week at any job, you want to make sure that's worth it to you because that's a big investment. What you receive typically depends on the industry, but it also depends on the type of job. It's hard to see down here, but exempt jobs just say that same thing, right? If you're exempt, you don't get paid overtime. This is just your flat salary no matter how much you work. Non-exempt, you do get overtime. Salary is the base of your checks, right? Like, this is what you're getting paid out each month. It's usually the most interesting number in the job offer, but it's not the only number. It's not where you stop looking, right? You gotta look beyond that. And this is how we typically compare job salaries to each other, is based on the base salary. And that's because bonus structures can change. Targeted bonuses tend to be there when times are good, and they are not always there when times get bad, but your salary shouldn't be shifting up and down. So that's what you want to really look at. You can find out, sometimes from the job offer itself, like salary increases, like are there pay raises that are scheduled, or is this something that I We'll just find out as I go. Can I get any promises on that? Because automatic raises are a big deal. That means your earning power over time is going to become considerably more. So there's none of that built into your contract. It means you're always going to have to negotiate for a raise. But the base salary itself is a sure thing, and that is something that you want to definitely weigh when you're looking at job offers. And also note, if there's ever a situation where you get an offer and you accept it, and then down the road, especially like in the short run down the road, and they say, well, we gotta dock you some salary because the company's not doing so well, right? That's a sign that you need to start looking for another job. Okay, they shouldn't be doing that. Bonuses, extra money, right? So they could be a sign-on bonus when you start. Some places will offer that. I think that sounds nice, but I often think that's, you kind of got to keep that at arm's length because that's a one-time thing, right? If somebody says, oh, we'll give you like $10,000 signing bonus. It's like, well, that's great. They obviously want you to be there, but just make sure that you're saving that money, right? Because that's not happening again. Merit pay, on the other hand, is something that could be a continual thing. So again, thinking about like, can I do well at this job? Can I succeed at this? Do I see places where I could grow? Is there room for me to get better? Could I possibly get these bonuses down the road? Those are important questions to ask, right? Because if you're looking at a sales job and it's very heavily weighted on, bonuses and compensation for sales, and you don't feel like you're the most confident salesperson in the world, well, maybe ideally you find a job that fits you better, but maybe for now you need to take this job. Maybe you don't want to get the job if it's purely based on commission, right? Like maybe you want to even it out a little bit and take the offer that maybe doesn't offer so much in bonuses, but it's not purely going to be your fault, right? If you can't sell anything. Company-wide bonuses or profit sharing is also something you want to look into. It's a little bit rarer, but it exists. Targeted bonuses. It's just, in general, just note that bonuses are less of a sure thing than salary, right? If somebody's trying to say, oh, yeah, salary's a little low, we can only offer this for sure, but, we really believe in our people, and we know that you can succeed, and we're going to target these, commissions for you, and you're going to get these bonuses. It's like, well, maybe, right? But they can sell you anything. Like, they can say anything. You got to be careful about what you're buying. If you trade out a bigger salary for a bigger bonus potential, you're betting on yourself, and that's okay to do, especially if you really believe in yourself. But again, this goes back to the losing hurts more than winning thing. So if I end up losing out on a bunch of money because I can't keep this job because I'm not actually that good of a salesperson, I might be kicking myself later, right? So be careful with that. Am I that good, or am I that addicted to gambling? And if not, maybe leave this one aside. Overtime pay is possible, right? If you're on salary, it's much less likely to get it. If you're exempt, you're not going to get it. But you will be working overtime. That's the trick, right? It's just a question of whether or not you get paid for it. Like I, for some reason, end up working weekends like a huge chunk of the year. And part of that is my fault because I could just put my foot down, right, and say, I won't do this. But the other part of me is like, I gotta get the job done anyway, so might as well do it when I have some time, right? And that's what it's like being on salary, right? I have taken, I think technically one vacation day in the past year that I've been working here, and I need to go on vacation. Anyways, independent contractors typically don't have overtime. Many administrative, professional, executive employees also don't have overtime. So if you're shooting to go up the ladder and you want to be CEO someday, like, don't worry about the overtime because you get plenty of other compensation. If you're exempt, you don't get it. Profit sharing or partial ownership of a company is typically related to working in the startup, or if you happen to already be like a CEO, some high-level executive, right? Typically, it's just on top of other compensation. It's not like a choice of this versus something else. So you're probably not going to need to really worry about this too much. Again, if you're looking at a startup, you're already sort of accepting a certain amount of risk and saying like, yes, I think this place can succeed, and I'm willing to take maybe a lower salary now in order to get an ownership stake that could be worth much more in the future. That's fine, but just again, that's sort of a gamble, right? And if you're just looking at, I want stability, I want to be okay, then look at that base pay, right? Because in this case, you're betting not just on yourself, but also on the company, which, you could be good, but maybe the company isn't that great. Like Cathan's over here, they're all right. They put up a profit last quarter, but what do they even sell? Nobody knows. Comparison job shopping. So the bottom line is, like I say, you're going to have choices. And even if you already have a job, you're going to have choices. And if you only get one offer, you're still going to have choices, right? So let's say, for example, that you have these three options that are in front of you, and you've been offered these jobs. One of them is in sales, one of them is in accountancy, and the other one is to be a sheriff's deputy, right? Okay, so a little variety there. And maybe the base salary and the bonuses and the overtime compare like this. So the private salesperson has a 50K base salary. That seems all right. Average bonuses a year, pretty good. No paid overtime because it's all on you essentially. So, okay, well, maybe that's going to be a lot of time I invest in that, and then some profit sharing. City accountant, you're getting a slightly better base salary. You're getting automatic yearly raises. Well, that's nice. That's the city folds. No overtime, you're exempt. No profit sharing. Cities don't share profit. And so your total compensation might be a little less than a salesperson, but also, less of it is on, bonuses that are not automatic. So this is sort of more of a guaranteed number versus the 52K that's guaranteed for the private salesperson. The sheriff's deputy, maybe you get an hourly wage and it's lower than the other base salaries, but it's very likely you'll do a lot of overtime because you got to do security at all those U2 concerts. No profit sharing, and the total would be maybe 64K, something, right? So you might work more hours, but you get compensated for those hours. So maybe these are your options. You want to think about like, well, what is it that I want to get out of a job? Which option is the best one for me? Well, again, it's really easy to just look at that number and say, well, I'll just go with a dollar figure that's bigger. But really, if you're doing that, you're making a comparison that's not necessarily in your favor in the long term, right? Like that's going the cognitive ease route. It's really easy to just say, I'll take the one with the larger number, than it is to really think about, well, what's behind that number? It makes me think about when I was applying to colleges and I kind of narrowed it down at the end. I was going to go to Oregon State or University of Oregon, and I ended up going to Oregon State because obviously, the school's amazing. But at the time, I kind of just picked it because Oregon State gave me a little more money than U of O did. And I didn't know how to choose between the two, so I was just like, well, might as well take more money. And it did work out in the end, but that was kind of the cognitive ease choice, and I probably should have made like a bigger pro and con list on that. But we are swayed by money, right? I think that's pretty universal. Okay, so it's usually normal to look at the money, but if you're just looking at money, then you're probably looking in the wrong place anyway, unless you're looking at going into medicine, because what do all these people have in common that are making a gigantic median pay, right? Like who's making over 200K a year? It's psychiatrists, anesthesiologists, OBGYNs, surgeons, orthodontists, oral surgeons, and, family general practitioner physicians, okay? So, and physicians and surgeons, I guess. So it's like you should be a doctor or a dentist if you want to make money, right? This is what it comes down to. And then you're on the list and you can find, chief executives is here, 189, it's pretty high, right? And marketing managers, 134. So if you get high up enough in a company, you can make money too, potentially. But you should probably be a pilot or a dentist or a doctor if you want to make money. But what do these jobs have in common besides being high paying and being related to the medical field? Oh, that's right. They take over your entire life. So you have to be willing to work forever, essentially, to get these kind of jobs. Or at least, spend the first 5 or 10 years of your next part of your life working forever. And I don't know. Also, you probably have a lot of student loans you got to pay off too. So, it's like that matters. You're going to make so much more than that. Anyway, so go be a doctor, I guess. Anyway, here's the deal. I'm going to give you $1,000 a week. How about it? Oh, what a great deal, right? I'll give you $1,000 a week. I can't afford to do that. So this is a hypothetical, okay? Would you take that deal, though? If a job said, I'm going to pay you $1,000 a week, would you take that job? So $52K a year. How do you feel about that? Feels like a trick somehow, doesn't it? Gotten inside your heads at this point. No, it's a gift. All right, now be wary of easy answers, right? It's easy to say, yeah, sure, I'll take that. I'll take a guaranteed thing. And that's because having money, seems better than not having money, right? And so system one says, well, I'd like to have money, so yeah, let's do it. System two is still sleeping over here because I haven't hit any sort of cognitive strain. Things that are bold, simple, memorable, and familiar are very persuasive, right? I go back to this page. It's like, oh, the numbers right here in bold. It's very clear. The words are simple. There's this kind of starburst thing going on that makes me feel like something's on sale, right? It makes it easier for me to say yes to something, but I don't even know what I'm saying yes to, right? Like, I offered you money, but maybe I'm asking for your internal organs or something, right? Like, who knows? Who knows what I'm capable of, right? I wouldn't trust me. Cognitive ease is a sign that system two is shut off, and I've made a choice that maybe I didn't use my critical thinking to make, right? We're biologically primed for things to be simple and clear and repeated and familiar, right? There's a reason for that. It's because if something's familiar, it's probably something I've encountered before, and since I'm not dead, that thing probably didn't kill me, right? Because if you're some ancient human and you're running through the woods and you see a tiger and you run up to the tiger and you give it a big hug and you say, oh, I love all nature, and the tiger eats your face and you're dead, well, that's going to inhibit your memory, right? Being dead tends to stop your memory from working. But if you're an ancient human and you go up and you find, like, I don't know what they ate, like a berry, like blackberries. Did they even have those in the ancient world? Probably not. Anyway, you see a blackberry and you're like, and you eat it, and it doesn't kill you, and you say, oh, that tastes nice. Well, next time around you see it, it's like, oh yeah, this is familiar. Oh, blackberry, yes. And you eat it much quicker because you know it's safe because it didn't kill you last time, right? Like, we're primed for that. Familiar things we tend to trust. But that doesn't mean we're making a good choice, right? In this modern world we live in, things aren't just about dying from tigers. So let's do a little more practice with this. Let's try to engage that system two, get some cognitive strain going, stop taking the easy way out with these answers and job offers. Okay, so here we go. If it takes 5 machines 5 minutes to make 5 products, how long would it take for 100 machines to make 100 products? Is it 100 minutes or 5 minutes? Well, system one says it's 100 minutes because 555, 100, 100, 100. System two says, wait a minute, no, it's actually still 5 minutes. Right. How should you feel when you're comparing job offers? Should you be going with that first instinct? Or should you be saying, like, wait a minute, system two, get over here. Let's dig through these details. All right, so we've looked at the money side of it. The benefits side is already going to engage system two because unlike money, it's not so familiar and sort of built into our brains that this is a good thing. Instead, benefits are more like, what is this stuff, right? So you have to get system two engaged anyway. It's harder to assess the value of your benefits at face value. It's not the same as looking at a salary across multiple jobs. It's much more complex. Knowing a good option requires that you consider who you are and what you're actually going to need, and what you're going to use, and what your risk tolerance is. And that's something, again, we're going to be talking about all year, right? Where are your risk tolerances? And also, if you have a family, or if you have kids, or if you have a partner, and any other complexity in your family life, you're going to feel differently about benefits than somebody else will. But keep in mind, a lot of times with benefits, you have choices you get to make into the future, and sometimes annually you can change your benefits, so you're not necessarily locking yourself in for all time, even though sometimes you are. So the first sort of big benefit that can be offered as part of a job package is health insurance. Typically it's going to fall into these categories: medical, dental, optical. Perhaps you're still covered under a partner's insurance or under your parents' insurance until you get a little older, or whatever it is. In which case, maybe you can opt out of your employer's coverage, and sometimes you'll make a little money by opting out because they're so happy to give you like $50 instead of spending, $10,000 on your benefits each year, or whatever it is. So check on that, see if you're eligible to continue to be on somebody else's insurance. But if you're not, you really want to look into this when you're looking at job offers. Employers are required to offer healthcare coverage to employees who work 30 or more hours a week. Very generous in them. Typical plans will cover going to a doctor, going to see a specialist, going to the hospital, going to the ER, right? And some plans offer alternative medical care like massages, which my wife has never forgiven me when I changed insurances years and years ago, and massages were no longer included in the package. But one of these days, I'll get rich enough that I can get the real, sweet deal option. If America still exists when I'm rich. Wellness, fitness promotions are sometimes built in. For example, the state plan that I have, if you exercise during the year, they knock off some money each month. Prescription plans, yep, so you can get your drugs. That's important. This guy over here, he needs to see a doctor, like, fast. Okay, they can probably still reattach that head, can't they? Like if you put it on milk or something. All right. Dental options. Dental insurance is not required because your teeth are not important, according to the government. But typically, if you have basic dental insurance, it'll cover routine cleanings and preventative care, and then it'll give you some help with sort of emergency care beyond that. It just depends on the services. If you're having actual oral surgery done, that's going to be a medical billing, right? But if it's anything that deals with your teeth and gums like otherwise, it's going to be under dental insurance. Dental insurance is nice, I think, in some ways, just as an incentive to go to the dentist. Like, that's why I carry it. It doesn't actually save me a ton of money, or very much money at all, if you look at paying out of pocket versus using their care. But since I'm like, well, I'm paying for this, premium, I might as well go, then it does make me go. Optical benefits are sort of similar. They're not required by law or anything, but it's nice to sort of be able to see if your eyes still work. If you're the kind of person that has like perfect vision and always has no issues with that, then this is obviously something that you might not want to pay for. But for someone like me who's had faulty eyes for 25 years or something like that at this point, this is a really helpful thing. So you're gonna have to do a little bit of walking through the woods if you get different options offered to you for your benefits. And one option that you're gonna be looking at is what are called HMOs, right? Health maintenance organizations. And what makes them interesting is that they're there to kind of keep all your costs and all your medical experiences in one house. And that's kind of nice for a lot of people, right? You have a primary care physician that you talk to about anything that comes up, and then they will give you referrals within the organization to other specialists and so on and so forth. And usually they cover emergency care. And typically in general, you can save money doing this because if you get an HMO, they're going to say like, oh, to see a doctor, it's like $5. And then to see a specialist, it's like $5. And to have a baby, it's like $5. And it's all very much like cost controlled. Example, common example in like Portland and around here, West Coast is Kaiser Permanente, but there's a lot of other ones as well. You might also be offered the option of a PPO, a preferred provider organization, and what that means is it's not an organization that has their own house that you sort of get all your medical care and dental care within. Instead, they have a network, right? And other third parties reach into this network and they have deals cut with those people so that they give you a better deal on your insurance. So for example, if you look at your provider's network, they might say, oh, we have, these doctors and these doctors. So if you go see them, we'll cover 90% of the cost. And then if you see somebody who's not in our network, we'll just cover 70%. So you have to cover the other 30%. Otherwise, they're sort of similar HMOs, except that they just don't have that designation of you live in this house and you use these providers. So if you want to compare benefits, there's a lot of ways of doing that. Typically, like I say, these are the big ones you're going to be looking at as an HMO or a PPO. And the big difference to me, HMO is you're doing it within one house. Everything goes through that primary care, doctor before you get referrals and all that, and everything is cheap, which is nice. And then the PPO plan is it's not one house. You got a lot of options. There's a whole network that's in here, so find things in your network, but you have more flexibility. So even though you pay a little more for your doctor visits and some of the care and all that, if I'm in Portland, I can get people that are in network. If I'm in Corvallis, I can get people in network. If I'm in California, I can find people in network or whatever else. Um, so there's a flexibility involved in the PPO. There's also consumer-directed healthcare plans. You might have heard of a health savings account or health reimbursement account. And what these do, they're basically a way to have a tax advantage way to save up for potential health costs throughout the year. So if you're somebody who has regular health bills, like maybe you have prescriptions constantly, or you have other care you have to manage, or need medical devices and things like that, it might make sense to have a health savings account or a health reimbursement account where money can be set aside pre-tax and it can sort of sprinkle out throughout the year to pay out these premiums or these deductibles. And so you might want to look into that if you're someone who always has, healthcare costs throughout the year. I tend to be kind of sporadic with my healthcare costs, so I don't typically use these because I feel like it's the kind of thinking that I don't want to do. Like I'm going the cognitive ease route here, right? But it is an option you have. And again, like anything that's tax advantaged or considered pre-tax, it's kind of free money, right? Like if you can throw money into this pool that, none of that's being paid to the IRS, it's like, well, here's a little bit of free. So that's not a bad thing, right? The choices of benefits that I tend to make, I tend to choose a PPO, and I make sure that the places that I go to on a regular basis are in the network, but it gives me a certain amount of flexibility. And then there's a cap on how much I'm gonna have to pay each year. And so when you get these offers, they will give you lists like this that show you what does it cost if I need this. Like if I go to a primary care visit, if I need to see a doctor, this. If I have a baby, if I have another baby, this is what's gonna cost me. It's so expensive, by the way. Be careful with babies, they're so expensive. Here's my insulin costs and so on and so forth. Hey, I get free insulin. I didn't know that. All right, good to know. And then, it goes on from there. Like here's this HEM non-participant thing. It means if I go run during the year or something like that, if I exercise a little bit, they take off a little bit of money. And so on and so forth. This is what it costs to get mental health care. I got to pay 30% of that myself, so nothing like incentivizing mental health, right? Oh well. They'll also potentially offer you life insurance when you get a job. Typically, there's some like small automatic coverage, and sometimes they'll offer you like a one-time, no exam offer of a bigger amount of health insurance. So maybe, for example, an organization says, "Here's $10,000. We'll pay for it," or you'll automatically pay, like $1 a month for it, something really cheap. But you can also today, take out a 50K or 100K life insurance figure and, no medical check or anything like that. If they offer you that, you might consider taking it if you have people in your life that you really care about, because it sort of defeats the hassle of having to go and actually get a medical check to get some kind of life insurance down the road. But otherwise, you may not need to worry about that too much if you don't have a bunch of kids yet. We'll talk about this more in the spring anyway, so don't sweat it completely. But you have to ask yourself these questions, right? Like, am I going to die soon? If I do, who's going to pay my debts? Did anything change in my life recently? Is it going to change? Is my family going to need me to make money? What will my cats need? My cat died in June, and I'm still not over it. I'm going to be honest with you. Poor Calla. She was too pretty for this world. Anyway, life insurance, things that affect what it costs you: age, sex, whether or not you smoke, medical history, driving record of all things, BMI, right? What does this chart tell you? Well, the big categories on this life insurance card are non-tobacco and tobacco, right? And one of these is more expensive than the other. And it basically says you should probably not smoke because it's going to kill you, and that's why they don't want to pay for life insurance for you. Okay, sorry. Accidental death and dismemberment insurance, sometimes that's an option. But again, it's like, how dangerously do you live, right? Like, do you ride with death on a horse on a regular basis? If so, you might need this. Usually they have certain values for what happens to you. If you like break off your leg or you lose a finger and a thumb, you get like a quarter of a payout. So grisly, so macabre. Disability insurance. Again, this depends on what your life looks like and how risky your job is and all that kind of stuff, right? And we will talk about this more in the spring as for the broader context of your future. So don't worry about it so much right now, but just know that you might get an offer like this when you are beginning a job. You also probably get something that deals with retirement. Again, retirement will be one of our focuses in spring, so I don't want to go crazy with this right now. Just note that there's two different kinds of common retirement options. One is the defined contribution plan. That means a certain amount of money is paid into the plan, but there's no guarantees on what the payout is at the end. And this is what a 401k, 403b, traditional IRA, Roth IRA, those are all in that category, right? You put money away, and then it hopefully makes money, and then you hopefully can retire on it. The other way of doing retirement is a defined benefit plan or pension, right? And this is rare outside of public jobs. It's another reason why I got a public job is because I happen to think pensions are awesome. And it means there's a defined benefit paid out. So it's not about how much money is put in. It's like when you retire, if you meet these qualifications, you will get this amount of money based on how much you worked and how much you were paid. So that's kind of nice. Like guaranteed money is nice. I just have to live another 25 years, right? That's the hard part is living, let me tell you. Pensions can be funded or not. So if it's something where you know that there's no funding to this pension, just note that you might not get full payout in 30 years when you retire. There's lots of calculators to figure out what you're going to need when you retire. And again, we'll talk about more of this stuff in the spring, but Excel has one that's kind of fun to play around with. And this one I did, and it said, well, you're going to need some more money because you're going to run out of money at age 91. And I kind of laughed at that because I was like, well, if I make it to 91, I'll be impressed and I'll be okay with destitution at that point. Vacation and sick time are also benefits you might consider when you're looking at a job offer. But you really want to think about like, how much of this am I going to take or how much can I take? Like, for example, I get 15 days of vacation a year or something like that. And sounds great. But literally, like I told you, I took like one day this year when it all evened out. Because I love you guys and because all I do is work for you. Not totally true, but kind of true. And kind of love is better than no love. Sick time, personal days, obviously having more is better, right? Because this could be a short-term disability boost for you potentially in the future. It's like, oh, I got all the sick time saved up. I don't have to worry about short-term disability. I got it covered out of my own pocket. But again, you want to know how flexible is this time? Can I take parts of days? Do I have to take full days? It might matter to you, so consider that. Other benefits, sometimes great companies will reimburse you for your commute or for your tuition or offer you fitness options or feed you or do all kinds of things, right? Fringe benefits are kind of nice and they come in a lot of different forms. Like if you work at Google, they give you death benefits. Yay! Facebook gives you housing if you're an intern, which is great if you're trying to live in the Bay Area, right? Netflix gives you unlimited vacation, except again, probably can't really take unlimited vacation. Kind of like my situation, it's more of a trap than anything else. Salesforce will pay you to volunteer time. Well, that's cool, pay you to do something nice. Spotify will help you freeze your eggs so that you can have kids when you're 75. Zappos has employee parades. I don't know what that means. And Munich Re, this German company, offers orgies. Okay. You're not going to find that in America, most likely. Well, you're not going to find it advertised in America, at least. So back to our comparison job shopping. We already kind of figured out our basic, values. But if we're looking at these objectively, we can't just look at the money. We also have to look at the benefits, right? So a private salesperson, in this case, you get an HSA, you get a retirement IRA, but there's no employee contributions. You're just doing it all on or no employer contributions. You're just paying it all on your own. It's your own IRA. You get no vacation or sick time. It's got to be on the road all the time. Maybe these benefits actually kind of suck. City accountant, you've got, good insurance. You've got good retirement, more or less being paid into. Good vacation, sounds solid. And the sheriff, oh man, you get to retire with a pension after 25 years. That's pretty sweet, right? So think about not just the money, also the benefits. Calculate your own value system, right? What's worth it to you? What are the things that you don't care about at all? You don't need to worry about that. Don't factor that into the price of admission, right? Just the things that you absolutely need. Think about your deal breakers. You got what you need. Cognitive strain practice 2. Oh man, this is hard to read. That's weird. In a lake, there's a patch of lily pads. Each day, the patch doubles in size. If it takes 48 days for the patch to cover the entire lake, how long would it take for the patch to cover half the lake? System 1 says 24 days. System 2 says, wait, what? Right? Cognitive disease. Sorry about that. The more cognitive strain that you're wrestling with, the more you focus and the better your choices that you make actually are. Cognitive ease is nice, but it often leads to bias, so always read the fine print. Satan over here did not read the fine print. Some references if you want to follow this stuff up a little further, and otherwise, have a great week, and I will talk to you next time.